Rice, bread, potatoes? If you have diabetes or you're watching your blood sugar, chances are someone has already told you to stay away from these foods. Maybe it was your doctor. Maybe it was a family member who read something online. And look, I get it. The advice comes from a good place. But here's the problem. These are the foods you've been eating your whole life. These are the foods your family sits down to every single night. Telling someone to just stop eating rice or bread forever, that's not realistic. That's not something most people can actually stick to long term. But here's what nobody is telling you. You do not have to give up these foods. You just have to know how to eat them correctly. And that difference is enormous. My name is Dr. Gregory Allen, and I've spent years working with patients managing blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. And today, I'm going to share 6 science-backed strategies that let you eat the foods you love without sending your blood sugar through the roof. Now, the $8 billion supplement industry would rather you never watch this video, because what I'm about to show you works better than their expensive pills and powders, and it costs you almost nothing. Drop a comment right now saying, "I deserve the truth," if you believe real health information should be free and available to everyone. Because in this video, I'm going to walk you through 6 strategies that are backed by real peer-reviewed research strategies that let you eat bread, rice, and potatoes safely. And stay with me, because strategy number 1 is the most powerful thing I'll share today. It's a simple technique that can cut your glucose spike by over 30% using the exact same meal you're already eating. Don't skip ahead. You'll want to see all 6 of these before it clicks how they all work together. Let's start with something that most people have never heard of, even people who've been managing diabetes for years. It's called resistant starch. And once you understand how it works, you're going to look at your rice and potatoes completely differently. Here's what normally happens when you eat a bowl of white rice or a piece of bread. Your digestive system breaks that starch down into glucose very quickly. We're talking within 30 minutes, that glucose is flooding into your bloodstream. And when that happens over and over again, day after day, your body starts to struggle. Your pancreas has to pump out more and more insulin to keep up. Over time, your cells stop responding to that insulin the way they should. That's insulin resistance. And that cycle is what makes type 2 diabetes progressively worse over the years. But resistant starch behaves completely differently. Your digestive enzymes simply cannot break it down efficiently. So instead of turning into glucose in your small intestine and spiking your blood sugar, resistant starch travels all the way down to your large intestine. And there, your gut bacteria ferment it. That fermentation process produces something called short-chain fatty acids, including one called butyrate. And butyrate is genuinely remarkable. It improves your insulin sensitivity. It helps reduce chronic inflammation throughout your body. And it actually feeds and strengthens the lining of your colon. So, you get all of that just from changing how you prepare your food. Now here is the part that surprises most people. You can actually create resistant starch from the exact same foods that would normally spike your blood sugar. The trick is simple. You cook your rice, your potatoes, your pasta, and then instead of eating it right away, you let it cool down in the refrigerator for at least 12 hours. Then you reheat it before you eat it. That's it. That one step increases the resistant starch content of that food by 2 to 3 times. We're talking 150 to 200% increase just from putting it in the fridge overnight. The science behind this is called starch retrogradation. When starch cooks, it gelatinizes and swells up. But when it cools slowly in the refrigerator, those starch molecules rearrange themselves into tight crystalline structures that your digestive enzymes can't easily break apart. So when you reheat it and eat it, a significant portion of that starch now behaves as resistant starch rather than fast-digesting glucose. And this is not just theory. A study published in the journal Nature looked at what happened when cooked rice was chilled at 4 degrees Celsius for 24 hours and then reheated. The resistant starch content increased from about 0.64 grams per 100 grams all the way up to 1.65 grams per 100 grams. That's a 2.6 times increase from one simple step. Research published in the journal Nutrients found that chilled potatoes reduced glucose spikes and insulin levels by more than 20% compared to potatoes eaten freshly cooked. And clinically, patients with type 2 diabetes who ate cooled and reheated rice or potatoes showed a 40 to 50% reduction in post-meal blood sugar spikes compared to eating those same foods fresh off the stove. So here is exactly what you do. Tonight, cook a bigger batch of rice or potatoes than you need for dinner. Put the extra in the refrigerator before you go to bed. Tomorrow morning or at lunch, take it out, reheat it however you like, and eat it. The texture will be very close to fresh. The taste will be nearly identical, but what's happening inside your body will be dramatically different. And if you want foods that are naturally high in resistant starch without any special preparation at all, reach for beans, lentils, chickpeas, green peas, steel-cut oats, and pearl barley. These are already working in your favor the moment you eat them. But this strategy only takes you so far when you're cooking at home. What about when you go out to eat and you have no control over how the food is prepared? That's exactly what the next strategy is designed for. Think about the last time you ate rice or bread completely by itself, nothing else on the plate. It probably doesn't happen very often. In real life, we almost always eat carbohydrates alongside other foods. And what those other foods are turns out to matter enormously, far more than most people realize. Let's start with protein. A comprehensive review that analyzed data from more than 150 clinical trials found that simply adding 25 to 30 grams of protein to a meal that contains carbohydrates reduced the glucose area under the curve by up to 50% in healthy adults. In people with type 2 diabetes, that reduction was even more dramatic, up to 60%. Protein does this by triggering the release of hormones like GLP-1 that slow down the rate at which your stomach empties into your small intestine. So instead of glucose rushing into your bloodstream all at once, it arrives gradually. In a steady stream, your body can actually manage. Healthy fats work in a very similar way. Fat slows gastric emptying, which gives your body more time to process the glucose coming in. It also helps your pancreatic beta cells. Those are the cells that make insulin function more effectively over time. This is why a potato eaten with a little olive oil and a piece of grilled chicken produces a much gentler blood sugar response than a plain potato eaten alone. The difference in glucose response between those two scenarios can be significant. There's actually a term some diabetes educators use for eating carbohydrates without any protein or fat alongside them. They call it eating naked carbs. And it's one of the worst things you can do for your blood sugar. Rice and beans together is almost always better than rice alone. Potatoes with butter and a protein source is far better than potatoes by themselves. Now here's another layer to this. Adding something acidic to your meal, things like vinegar, lemon juice, or lime juice can meaningfully blunt your glucose response. Fermented foods like kimchi or sauerkraut work the same way. The acid in these foods inhibits an enzyme called alpha amylase, which is responsible for breaking down starch in your digestive system. Slow down that enzyme and you slow down how fast glucose enters your bloodstream. The acetic acid in vinegar specifically has also been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in your muscle cells and to reduce the amount of new glucose your liver produces between meals. But here is the strategy within the strategy. And the research on this genuinely surprised me when I first read it. The order in which you eat the foods on your plate matters just as much as what those foods are. A randomized controlled crossover trial led by researchers at Weill Cornell Medical College and published in the journal Diabetes Care found that people with type 2 diabetes who ate their protein and vegetables before their carbohydrates had a 73% lower glucose area under the curve compared to eating the carbohydrates first. The study also found a 40% reduction in peak glucose levels and 31% lower insulin levels. A separate study conducted in Japan using continuous glucose monitors in healthy adults found that eating rice at the end of the meal rather than the beginning reduced dangerous blood sugar spikes by up to 50%. So the practical application is simple. When your food arrives at a restaurant and they put bread or chips on the table before your meal, leave them alone. Start with your salad. Eat your protein. Wait about 10 minutes. Then go for the carbohydrates. It is a small behavioral shift, but the metabolic payoff is enormous. The food you eat and the order you eat it in can transform your glucose response. But your body also has a built-in glucose disposal system that most people never take advantage of. And that's what strategy 4 is all about. This next strategy might be the simplest thing on this entire list. No special food preparation, No timing your meals in advance. Just one small habit right after you eat that can make a measurable difference in your blood sugar within minutes. Walk. That's it. A randomized controlled trial from the University of Otago, published in the journal Diabetologia, found that just 10 minutes of light walking immediately after a meal reduced post-meal blood sugar by 12 to 22% compared to sitting still. Not a 30-minute gym session, not an intense workout. 10 minutes of easy walking around the block. Now here's why this works. And it's actually fascinating once you understand the mechanism. When you walk, you activate the muscles in your legs, particularly a muscle in your calf called the soleus. The soleus muscle is a genuine metabolic powerhouse. Unlike most other tissues in your body, the soleus can pull glucose directly out of your bloodstream without needing insulin to do it. It uses what scientists call non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake. And because the soleus is made up almost entirely of slow-twitch muscle fibers, it can keep working for a long, sustained period without getting tired. So you're clearing glucose from your blood continuously for 20, 30, even 40 minutes after you start moving. Researchers at the University of Houston took this even further. They found that a simple seated movement they called a soleus push-up, basically just raising and lowering your heels while sitting, could activate this same glucose clearance mechanism and improve blood sugar control for hours, even without standing up. But walking remains the gold standard because it engages multiple muscle groups at once and carries additional cardiovascular benefits on top of the blood sugar effects. The timing matters here. The window you want to aim for is within 15 to 30 minutes of finishing your meal. That's when your blood sugar is beginning to climb, and that's when movement is most effective at intercepting that rise. You don't have to go outside. Cleaning up the kitchen, washing dishes, climbing a flight of stairs, any of these count, and all of them produce measurable results. You now know what to eat alongside your carbs and what to do right after your meal. But there's one factor that almost nobody thinks about, and it has nothing to do with the food itself. Here is something that genuinely surprises most of my patients when I bring it up. If you take the exact same meal, same foods, same portions, same everything, and you eat it at noon versus eating it at 8 o'clock at night, your body responds to those two meals completely differently. The evening version will produce a blood sugar spike that is 15 to 20% higher, even though nothing about the food changed at all. The reason for this comes down to your body's internal clock. Your ability to process glucose follows a circadian rhythm, which means it peaks earlier in the day and declines as evening approaches. In the morning and early afternoon, your pancreas is firing on all cylinders. It secretes insulin quickly and efficiently. Your muscle cells are highly sensitive to that insulin and pull glucose out of your blood readily. Your liver is behaving itself. Everything is working together the way it's supposed to. But as the day goes on, that machinery starts winding down. By evening, your pancreatic beta cells are less responsive, your muscles are less sensitive to insulin, and your liver becomes more likely to convert any excess glucose into fat rather than clearing it properly. Then, on top of all of that, your body starts producing melatonin as bedtime approaches. That's the hormone that makes you sleepy, and melatonin actually suppresses insulin secretion by an additional 40 to 50%. So you have less insulin available at exactly the time when your body is already struggling to process glucose efficiently. What this means practically is straightforward. Eat your largest carbohydrate-containing meals earlier in the day. Breakfast and lunch are your metabolic sweet spots. If you're going to have rice or bread or potatoes, have them then. Keep your dinner lighter on carbohydrates. And try to finish eating your last meal of the day at least 3 hours before you go to bed. That gap gives your body the time it needs to process whatever glucose remains before your overnight fast begins. This is also one of the core reasons why intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating works so well for blood sugar control. It's not only about the fasting itself, it's about aligning your eating window with the hours when your body's metabolic machinery is actually optimized to handle it. Now, even with perfect timing, the type of carbohydrate you choose makes a bigger difference than most people expect. A lot of people hear the words blood sugar and carbohydrates in the same sentence and immediately think the solution is to cut out all carbs entirely. And while that works for some people, it's not the whole picture. Because the honest truth is, it's not carbohydrates themselves that cause the problem. It's the level of processing those carbohydrates have gone through before they reach your plate. And that distinction changes everything. Think about what happens when a grain of wheat gets milled into fine white flour. All of the outer bran, the germ, the natural fiber, it all gets stripped away. What's left is an ultra-fine powder that your digestive system can break down in 15 to 20 minutes. That glucose hits your bloodstream fast, hard, and all at once. Your pancreas scrambles to keep up. Your blood sugar spikes, then crashes, and you're left feeling tired and hungry again within an hour. Now compare that to steel-cut oats, or intact grain berries, or a slice of real sourdough bread. These foods still contain their natural fiber and structural complexity. Your digestive system has to work much harder and much longer to break them down. The glucose comes in slowly over 2 to 3 hours. Your pancreas has time to respond appropriately. Your blood sugar rises gently and comes back down smoothly. Same category of food, completely different outcome. A good way to picture this is to think about building a fire. Fine white flour, instant oatmeal, white bread, those are like throwing a handful of sawdust into the flames. It ignites instantly, flares up intensely, and burns out in seconds. That's your glucose spike followed by your crash. But steel-cut oats, intact grains, high-fiber foods, those are like adding a solid log to the fire. It catches slowly, burns steadily, and gives you sustained warmth for hours. That's stable blood sugar. Here's how this plays out with specific foods you probably already eat. White rice carries a glycemic index of around 73 and has almost no fiber. Brown rice comes in at 68 with 3.5 grams of fiber per cup, but black rice or wild rice has a glycemic index between 42 and 45 with 5 to 6 grams of fiber per cup. Same basic food, dramatically different metabolic response. With bread, white bread sits at a glycemic index of 75 with virtually no fiber. Sourdough, because of the fermentation process, lands between 48 and 54 and absorbs much more slowly. Sprouted grain breads like Ezekiel bread have a glycemic index around 36 and contain 4 to 5 grams of fiber per slice, along with naturally occurring resistant starch. For potatoes, regular russet potatoes have a glycemic index of 85 to 90, among the highest of any common food. Sweet potatoes range from 44 to 61 depending on how they're prepared, and they come loaded with fiber and nutrients that actively support insulin sensitivity. Here's the thing that ties all of this together. You can take a russet potato, which would normally be one of the worst things for your blood sugar, cool it overnight in the refrigerator to create resistant starch, reheat it the next day, eat it alongside protein and vegetables in the right order, and you have transformed what was once a blood sugar problem into a reasonable, manageable meal. The strategies build on each other. Each one makes the others more effective. Before we get to the final strategy, the one that actually amplifies everything else we've covered, if this information has been useful to you, take a second and hit that subscribe button. This channel exists to give you real, science-based health information for free, not to sell you anything, not to push you toward an expensive product, just honest information you can actually use. We have saved the best for last, and I say that because this final strategy is the only one on this list that directly enhances and amplifies every single other strategy we've already talked about. When you combine this with what you've already learned, the effects stack on top of each other in a way that produces results most people simply don't expect from something this ordinary. We're talking about vinegar, plain, inexpensive, available at every grocery store in America. Most people use it as a salad dressing ingredient and never think about it again. But researchers at Arizona State University and institutions around the world have spent years studying what the acetic acid in vinegar does to your blood sugar, and the findings are genuinely remarkable. Let's go through exactly how it works, because vinegar doesn't just do one thing, it works on 4 completely separate mechanisms simultaneously. The first mechanism is enzyme inhibition. Acetic acid, which is the active compound in vinegar, inhibits an enzyme called alpha-glucosidase. This is the same enzyme targeted by the prescription diabetes medication, Carbs. By slowing this enzyme down, vinegar slows the rate at which your small intestine breaks down and absorbs starch. 1 to 2 tablespoons of vinegar consumed before or during a meal containing carbohydrates can reduce your glucose spike by 20 to 35%. The second mechanism is gastric emptying. Vinegar physically slows the rate at which your stomach pushes food down into your small intestine. That gives your body more time to process the incoming glucose gradually rather than receiving it all in a sudden rush. Instead of your blood sugar spiking sharply within 30 minutes, the rise is slower, lower, and more manageable. The third mechanism is insulin sensitivity in your muscles. Acetic acid has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity in skeletal muscle tissue by up to 34%. Your muscle cells become significantly better at pulling glucose out of your bloodstream on their own, without requiring as much insulin to do the job. For anyone dealing with insulin resistance, this is a big deal. The fourth mechanism is liver glucose production. Your liver constantly produces small amounts of glucose through a process called gluconeogenesis. In people with diabetes or insulin resistance, the liver tends to overproduce glucose, particularly overnight and between meals. This is one of the main reasons fasting blood sugar can be elevated in the morning, even when you haven't eaten since dinner. Studies have found that taking 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before bed can reduce fasting blood glucose the following morning by 4 to 6%, an effect comparable to what some diabetes medications achieve, through an entirely natural mechanism. A study published in Frontiers in Clinical Diabetes and Healthcare followed patients with type 2 diabetes who consumed 30 milliliters of apple cider vinegar daily for 8 weeks and found meaningful reductions in both fasting blood, glucose, and hemoglobin A1C. That's the marker that reflects your average blood sugar over the past 3 months. A comprehensive review published in Frontiers in Nutrition in 2025 confirmed across multiple studies that regular vinegar consumption produces significant improvements in glycemic control in people with type 2 diabetes. Research also shows that vinegar increases feelings of fullness by up to 55%, which means you naturally eat smaller portions of carbohydrates without feeling deprived. Here is how to use it practically. Dilute 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar or red wine vinegar in a large glass of water and drink it 10 to 15 minutes before your main meal. This gives the acetic acid time to begin working on your digestive enzymes before the food even arrives. You can also use vinegar directly in your cooking as a salad dressing, in marinades, splashed over roasted vegetables. And here's where it gets particularly powerful. If you start your meal with a salad dressed in vinegar, then eat your protein, then finish with your carbohydrates, you are combining the vinegar strategy, the food pairing principle, and the eating sequence strategy all at once. 3 separate glucose-lowering mechanisms working simultaneously, from habits that cost you nothing and add almost no time to your day. One important safety note: always dilute vinegar before consuming it. Drinking it straight can damage tooth enamel and irritate the lining of your esophagus. And if you have a condition called gastroparesis, which involves delayed stomach emptying and occurs in some people with longer-term diabetes, talk to your doctor before making vinegar a daily habit, as it may worsen that particular condition. Let's bring all of this together, because 6 strategies can feel like a lot to hold in your head at once. So I want to give you a clear, simple framework you can actually start using today, not someday, not after you've memorized everything today. The science here is unambiguous. These 6 strategies represent a clinically supported, research-backed approach to eating carbohydrates without destroying your metabolic health. And taken together, they go far beyond the standard advice most doctors offer their patients with diabetes, and light years beyond what the supplement industry would ever want you to know. Here is your complete action plan broken down by when you do it. Before your meal, about 10 to 15 minutes before you sit down to eat, dilute 1 to 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar in a large glass of water and drink it. This primes your digestive enzymes and begins improving your insulin sensitivity before the first bite. When you're preparing your food, cook your rice, potatoes, or pasta the night before whenever you can. Refrigerate it overnight and reheat it when you're ready to eat. That one step alone can reduce the glucose impact of that meal by 40 to 50% through resistant starch formation. When you build your plate, never put carbohydrates on there alone. Always pair them with a protein source, a healthy fat, and some non-starchy vegetables. Eating naked carbs is one of the easiest mistakes to fix and one of the highest impact changes you can make. When you actually sit down to eat, start with your vegetables and your protein. Give yourself about 10 minutes before you move to the carbohydrates. That sequence alone has been shown to reduce peak glucose by up to 73% using the exact same foods. After your meal, within 15 to 30 minutes of finishing, get up and walk for 10 minutes. Clear the table, do the dishes, go around the block. Your soleus muscle will handle the rest. And finally, think about when, during the day, your largest carbohydrate meals fall. Shift them earlier. Breakfast and lunch are your best windows. Keep dinner lighter on carbs and try to finish eating at least 3 hours before bedtime. Now, I know what you might be thinking. That's a lot to change all at once. And you're right, so don't try to do all of it immediately. Start with just one strategy this week. The eating sequence, saving your carbohydrates for last, is the easiest place to begin and produces dramatic results on its own. Then next week, add the 10-minute walk after meals. The week after that, start cooking your rice and potatoes the night before. Layer them in gradually, and before long, they become habits you don't even have to think about. These strategies are not just for people managing diabetes. Anyone who wants steadier energy through the day, better mental clarity, fewer cravings, easier weight management, and stronger long-term metabolic health can benefit from keeping their blood sugar stable. Because those spikes and crashes affect everyone, they drive inflammation, accelerate aging, damage blood vessels, and contribute to nearly every major chronic disease we face today. You do not have to give up the foods you love. You just have to learn how to eat them smarter. And now you have exactly the tools to do that. If you believe people deserve access to honest health information, not fear-driven marketing from companies that profit when you stay confused and dependent, subscribe to this channel. Hit that button right now. The only people who won't are the ones who benefit from keeping you in the dark. And stay tuned for the next video, where we're going to talk about inexpensive, everyday foods that help you build and preserve muscle as you get older, and exactly how to use them throughout your day to fight back against muscle loss. I'll see you there.